Hello everyone, and welcome back to the video lecture series for algebra. Today we are going to be taking that process that we've learned about graphing lines, and we are going to be going backwards. We are going to be taking the information about a line already, or the existing graph of a line, and we are going to be writing the equation that goes with that line. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that third form of the equation of the line called point-slope form. So point-slope form is written in the form of y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, where m stands for the slope, and x1 comma y1 is any point that is on the line. And I want to emphasize that this is any point. So the x1 is the x-coordinate of a point, and then y1 is the y-coordinate of a point, as long as it is on that line. Now, the equation of a line always needs to have an x and a y in it. So this y right here and this x right here are going to be part of the equation, and they are going to stay there. But there are going to be numbers plugged in for m, x1, and y1. So if you need to change an equation of a line from point-slope form into slope-intercept form, all you have to do is distribute the slope, distribute that m to clear out those parentheses, and then add y1 to both sides to solve for y. So the process for writing the equation of a line, writing the equation that goes with a line, is going to revolve a lot around point-slope form. So in these problems, you are going to be taking known information about the line, such as two specific points that it goes through, and writing the equation that would match that line. Now, the only two things that you need to write the equation of a line is a point that is on the line and a slope. So as long as you have one single point and you know the slope, or you have enough information to figure out the slope, you can use point-slope form to write the equation of a line. So we're going to write the equation in point-slope form of the line with a slope of -2 that passes through the point -1 comma 5. So this problem specifically asked us to use point-slope form. Point-slope form looks like this: y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Now, the only two things that you need to write the equation of a line are a point and a slope, which we have both. So the slope is -2, so your m is -2. And then we have this point -1 comma 5. -1 is the x-coordinate, so I'm going to call that x1, the x-coordinate of the point that we were given. And then 5 is the y-coordinate, so I'm going to call that y1, the y-coordinate of the point that we were given. So all I'm going to do is go back to my point-slope form. In for m, I'm going to plug in -2. In for x1, I'm going to plug in -1. And in for y1, I'm going to plug in 5. Now, the minus signs that are between y and y1 and x and x1 are part of the formula and need to stay there. So these minus signs are always going to be there regardless of what x1 and y1 are. So x and y are going to be left alone. Anything that I did not circle needs to be left alone and left exactly where it is. So I have y minus y1, which I've labeled as 5, equals m, which is -2, times x minus x1, which is -1. Now, you really don't want to leave it like that. That double negative, when you subtract a negative, you can write it as addition. So I'm going to rewrite this as y minus 5 equals -2 times x plus 1. That minus minus is going to turn into a plus. And then, because the problem asked us to write this in point-slope form, this is our final answer, and this is a good enough equation. This is a legitimate form of the equation of a line, so this is our equation of a line in point-slope form. So in that last problem, we were given a point and a slope, and it was really easy to write the equation of a line. Now, those are the only two things that you need to write the equation of a line. And if you are not given a slope directly, you need to have an additional point to find the slope between them. Because remember, through any 2 points, you can draw exactly one line. And if you have 2 points, you can use the slope formula to find the slope between them. So we're going to write the equation of the line between the 2 points 2 comma 3 and -4 comma 5. So we have more than enough points to choose from. The big thing that we are missing is the slope. So that's the first thing we're going to do, is we are going to find the slope between these 2 points. Now since we have 2 points, we're going to use the slope formula, which is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So 2, 3 is the first point, so I'm going to call it x1 and y1. Negative 4, 5 is my second point, so I'm going to call that x2 and y2. So to find the slope, I'm simply going to plug all of these into their appropriate spots in the slope formula. So m equals y2, which I have labeled as 5. That minus sign is part of the formula. y1, which I have labeled as 3. And then divided by x2, which is negative 4. That minus sign is part of the formula. x1, which is 2. Subtract first and then divide, so 5 minus 3 is 2. Negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. Gives us a slope, when you reduce it, of negative 1/3. Remember, you want to leave your slope as a fraction. Never write your slope as a decimal. So now we have more than enough points to choose from, and we have a slope. We can now use point-slope form to write the equation of a line. So y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So in for m, I'm going to plug in negative 1/3. In for x1, I'm going to plug in the x-coordinate of either of these points. Well, I've already got x1 labeled as 2, so I might as well stick with the same labels. So I'm going to plug in 2 in for x1. I already have 3 labeled as y1, so I'm going to go ahead and plug 3 in for y1. Anything that I did not circle needs to be left as it is. So we have y minus 3 equals negative 1/3 times x minus 2. Since there are no double negatives to simplify, you can leave it like this. Unless a problem specifically tells you to put it in, to write it in slope-intercept form, you can go ahead and leave it in point-slope form. This is completely fine. This is a good enough final answer. So we're going to do that same thing on this next one. Now remember, if you want to attempt this problem before I go over it, just feel free to pause the video right now and then resume when you are done. Okay, so the 2 things that you need to write the equation of a line are a point and a slope. Well, we have more than enough points. The big thing that we are missing is the slope. So we need to find the slope first. So we're going to use the slope formula to find the slope between these 2 points. So the slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this first point here, I'm going to call x1 and y1. I'm going to call the second point here x2 and y2. So I'm just going to plug each of those into the slope formula into their appropriate places. So m equals y2, which is 7, minus this, remember, that minus sign is part of the formula. y1 is negative 2, divided by x2, which I've labeled as 1. That minus sign is part of the formula. x1, which is negative 2. And yes, we have a lot of double negatives here. So minus minus, 7 minus negative 2 is 9. Divided by minus minus becomes plus. 1 minus negative 2 is 3. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So 3 is your slope. So now that we have more than enough points and a slope, now we can use point-slope form to write the equation of a line. So point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So in for m, I am going to plug in 3. In for x1, I am going to use the label I already have, which is negative 2. And then in for y1, I am going to plug in the label I already have, which is negative 2. Remember, those 2 minus signs that are in point-slope form already exist and are going to stay there regardless of what x1 and y1 are. So I'm just going to plug all these in, and anything I did not circle needs to be left alone and left where it is. So we have y minus y1, which is negative 2, equals m3 times x minus x1, which is negative 2. Then each of those minus minus can become plus, so y plus 2 equals 3 times x plus 2. And then because it didn't say otherwise, I'm going to leave this in point-slope form and call this my final answer. So we're going to do that same thing on this next one. We are going to write the equation of the line that passes through the points 7, -1 and 0, -3. So we have a couple of points. The biggest thing that we don't have right now is the slope. So that's the first thing that we need to do. The first thing that we have to do is find the slope between these 2 points using the slope formula. So m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm going to call this first point x1 and y1. I'm going to call this second point x2 and y2. So then I'm going to plug each of these into their appropriate spots in the slope formula. So I have m equals y2, which is -3, minus y1, which I had labeled as -1. Remember that minus sign is part of the formula. It needs to stay there even if y1 is negative. Then divided by x2, which I have labeled as 0, minus x1, which is 7. So we're going to subtract first and then divide. So that minus can become a plus. So -3 plus 1 is -2. 0 minus 7 is -7. And then, yeah, you're going to leave it as a fraction, but a negative divided by a negative is a positive 2 over 7. So positive 2/7 is your slope. So now that I have a slope and a point, I am going to use point-slope form to write the equation of the line. So point-slope form is y minus y1. Let's try that again. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So then I'm going to plug 2/7 in for m. In for x1, I'm going to use the label I already have, which is 7. And then in for y1, I'm going to use the label I already have, which is -1. Anything that I did not circle needs to be left alone and left exactly where it is. So we have y minus y1, which is -1, equals m 2/7 times x minus x1, which is 7. And then the only simplifying to do is if you see any double negatives like that y minus -1, please turn that minus into a plus. So that is y plus 1 equals 2/7 times x minus 7. And then that is going to be your final answer. So we're going to do a couple of things for this next one. We're going to take the points 3, 5 and 2, 1. And then the first thing we're going to do is we are going to write the equation of the line that passes through these points in point-slope form. So this part was very specific. We are supposed to write the equation in point-slope form. So that's what we'll do first. Now, we have a couple of points. I'm going to call this first point x1 and y1. I'm going to call this second point x2 and y2. The big thing that we are missing is the slope. So we first need to find the slope between the 2 points using the slope formula. So the slope formula is m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I'm just going to plug in all of these points into their appropriate spots in the slope formula. So y2, which I have labeled as 1, minus is part of the formula, y1, which is 5, divided by x2, which is 2, minus x1, which is 3. So we're going to subtract first. So 1 minus 5 is -4, over 2 minus 3 is -1. -4 divided by -1 is 4. So 4 is my slope. So since part A was very specific that it wanted point-slope form, I'm going to make sure that I'm writing this in the appropriate form. So point-slope form goes something like this. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So in place of m, I am going to plug in 4. In place of x1, I'm going to use the existing label as 3. And then in for y1, I already have it labeled as 5, so I'm going to plug 5 in for y1. Anything that I did not circle needs to be left alone and exactly where it is. So y minus y1, which is 5, equals m 4 times x minus x1, which is 3. And since there are no double negatives to simplify, this is my final answer. This is point slope form. Now for part B, we're going to write the equation of the line that passes through these points in slope-intercept form. So I've already gone to the trouble of finding the slope and getting an equation of a line. So I have the existing equation right now in point slope form. Y minus 5 equals 4 times parentheses x minus 3. You can easily change this into slope-intercept form by simply getting y by itself. So if you go from your point slope form and you just solve this literal equation for y, you will rewrite this in slope-intercept form. Because if you remember from the previous videos, an equation is in slope-intercept form if y is by itself. So I'm going to first clear out the parentheses by distributing the 4. So I have y minus 5 equals 4 times x is 4x. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Then I'm going to finish getting y by itself by adding 5 to both sides. So I get y equals 4x minus 7. Now that y is by itself, this is in slope-intercept form. So to turn an equation from point slope form into slope-intercept form, all you have to do is distribute to clear out the parentheses and then add whatever y1 was to both sides to get y by itself. So that is it for section 7.4, writing the equation of a line. So on your homework or any tests or quizzes, just make sure that you are writing the equation in the form that it tells you to. Now, if I don't specify what form I want you to write it in, you can feel free to use point slope form. So just make sure that you are reading the directions and following the directions. So thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video, which is going to be section 9.4, graphing linear inequalities. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all very much, and I'll see you in the next one.